Now, after this brief historical overview, speaking of the evaluation of what UPF is now, 2008 is not exactly now. That's when Dr. Mickler wrote this article, which is very informative, written by an insider, but an insider who is a very sharp intellectual mind, trained academic, and can sometimes be quite critical from that perspective, regardless of his personal life or faith. And that was 2008, that's 18 years ago. But in the meantime, many things have remained the same. So it's still the article to go to, knowing that, of course, more came afterwards. But that is the main historical presentation. And complementing it is one by an article of Chesner that is it's an acronym for an organization for religious freedom, religious liberty, headquartered in Italy and headed by Dr. Massimo Introvini, whom we will know. And then there's a third one that's also recent, written by a professor at the University of Vienna, Pokorny, who is not a member, not in any way related to us, but whose assistant, doctoral student, was, or not doctor yet, Dominic Zöller, who is the second-gen son of the then national leader of Austria. So these three articles together, the last two are much more recent, 2022, that's current somehow. They, you can say, argue with each other, but also complete each other. You can see they're talking about the same thing, though not exactly with the same, from the same perspective, but very, very complementary. So I'm picking 2 out of 18 proposals that Dr. Mickler at the end of his article, and I suggest you really read them carefully because they can be applied to all our organizations, and for your final paper you will have to pick one. So I suggest that you read these 18 carefully. Things that Dr. Mickler suggests we should change if you want to be really successful or more successful with UPF. And I'm just going to look at number 4 and number 17. Number 4 is the unification movement's ideas. And they are great, he doesn't deny that, but they require more systematic elaboration and intellectual grounding. Now, that's what we're trying to do right now in this course and at HGI. The movement needs to integrate speeches and position papers of conference participants with unification movement ideas. UPF should cease publishing poorly prepared conference proceedings and work to establish a research component on its website. In other words, we should be more than just a group of activists, even with some kind of academic credentials, like the head has a PhD and things like that. And we invite people who are high-level people, including academics and heads of state or so. But what we publish is not really integrated with what we believe and in a way that is thought through, analyzed in credible ways that can lead people to understand it and to see how it can apply in the world at large effectively. So that's his suggestions. We need more intellectual grounding. And we should include or explore developing a think tank or a peace academy to develop its UPF's ideas. So I just compare that to what the authors, there's 5 of them, of Chesner say. For its richness of diverse perspectives and deep analysis of the issues in a good number of papers, the World Summit 2020, which is one of the last or second last big meetings we had, compared favorably to many other similar conferences, including those organized by the United Nations and other international bodies. So that sounds very like a high praise. And I would say both are very compatible. The United Nations, no matter what United Nations it is often limited by those who participate, and the speeches are often not that great. They are political speeches. Much of what the UN does is not very high quality. It's meaningful because it's the UN. You have to take it seriously, but the quality is not necessarily very great, which is implied here. And that applies to all UN bodies. And their website is very lacking. Many aspects of their website are kind of pathetic, actually. They don't have the funds, they are broke. So, in any case, here the suggestion is actually not that bad. But I think both have a point. Dr. Meckler certainly has a point, and I will just explain something. When we, in our efforts to try to bring people to understand our ideas and to join us in trying to realize them, there's essentially three elements. That's my three elements, just me, but they're based on something. Spiritual inspiration, we have that. We are spiritually inspired, not always, but anyway, we have that potential for sure. And we have been able to inspire people, specifically people who are religious. Some of them, of course, there are many religious people who are not inspired, and some of them are not even, don't even have the potential to be inspired, but some do. And with ACLC, WCLC, we have been able to inspire many religious leaders to follow us. That's spiritual inspiration. We have been very active with precisely that activities, and UPF has done much of that. We have been active on so many different levels. So we have inspired people to join us just because they're inspired. They feel that we have something. They feel that being with us, they feel elevated, they feel like, yes, I want to do that. It's a feeling, an inspiration, and some kind of a spiritual understanding, not to be denied. But inspiration can come and go. And you can be inspired for a long time. As long as you don't really understand, you never know what can happen. And activities bring people together. If you work with somebody on a project, I've experienced that many times, I think all of you the same, you become so close. You forget that these people, if you experience something, the people are still different from you. When I went back to Albania in 2023, one of the people I was happiest to meet was a lady, a famous Albanian intellectual, Elsa Balauri, whose focus, one of her most important things she was always trying to do is support the LGBT community. She was an LGBT activist. So she was in many ways the complete opposite of us. But I went, my wife with me, and many of us, we went through so much in the early days when there was still communism, and then just after communism. We went through so much together. You feel you become a comrade in arms. At the same time, part of you knows, well, she's on the other side in many ways, but you become close. So activities have that, and we all know what it is. But again, if you don't have the same understanding, you can feel close, but there's some limitation. You cannot go all the way, and you never know when it will stop. So the third element, inspiration, activities, the third element is intellect, understanding. And that's why I'm involved with the Research Institute for the Integration of World Thought, which was founded by Reverend Moon in 1999, and which has that goal to lead to the spread of the really in-depth understanding of what Reverend Moon and his wife have brought and what it has become, and how this understanding can change the way people look at the world, not just by inspiration, not just activity, but really understanding. And that is partly what Dr. Meckler is looking at. And I think we really have to do a lot more. And HJI now, changing from just the religious sphere when it was UTS, is part of it. We had actually for a long time, through the International Conference on the Unity of Sciences that have taken place every year since 1972 and similar ones, we had an incredible number of academics in every field who became close to us and came to our conferences, and they never got really to the point of understanding deeply, and they became old. And at this point, we have to make an effort to regain momentum on that level. And I think it's important. So that's my take on this. Now, the top is still the same, but at the bottom now you have the second part of what Chesno says. UPF is an NGO and a think tank whose events are attended by prestigious leaders such as Ban Ki-moon and José Manuel Barroso, and which offers interesting position papers, lectures, and documents on international peace and development issues, including on the relations between North and South Korea. So again, at least somebody acknowledges it's interesting, it's meaningful, but not quite enough. It's not systematic enough, not in-depth enough. So we have to make an effort on that. Now, talking again about my short visit to the Balkans in 23, I was there representing HJI and at UPF, and I spoke to the board of UPF Albania. That was their annual board meeting, and I was there at that time, so they asked me to speak. And from my own observation and also discussing with the other representatives there, but Jacques, my friend Jacques from UPF Europe, they had the sense, and I had the sense, that there was a need for more academic sophistication. So these people, in talking with them, I could really feel they are longing for more academic, because they are academics mostly. So they can understand a movement through inspiration and the good things we do, inspiration activity, but they would like to have a little bit more intellectual sophistication. And by that, I don't mean just to be able to speak lofty academic language, but actually analyze things in depth. Now, I move on, still following Mikla, to a recommendation he makes. He makes several recommendations, but one of them is relinquish control, share governance. So that's his 17th recommendation. The Unification Movement should relinquish, that means give up control, or at least share governance of the able UN. It should ratify a charter, create a charter and ratify it, which clarifies rules of procedures and ensures the participation of non-Unification Movement leaders. So in this, he says that basically we speak of UPF and other things as being all-inclusive. You don't need to become a unificationist to become part of it. That's what we always say, and it's true. Ban Ki-moon is certainly not a unificationist, and neither is Hun Sen, and neither is anybody at UPF, in UPF except our members. And we're not trying in any way to make them members. But what he says is, the hidden part in that is that precisely because they are not unificationists, they are never really in charge. We don't share governance with them. So basically, we don't practice what we preach, and we keep full control of UPF. Well, things have changed since 2008 to some degree. Also, this is just Dr. Mekla's opinion. You are not expected to necessarily share it, and I share it in part. Things change sometimes, like when he said that we need a think tank. Well, now we had a think tank in Korea, the exact word was used. So things happen have happened after 2008. But more fundamentally, to be a leader of something, you need to be fully part of it. These gentlemen are coming to help, and sometimes they become leaders. Actually, both Ban Ki-moon and Barroso, and also Barroso is the chair of the Sunhak Peace Prize Committee. And Hun Sen was the chair of the Asian Summit Council. I forgot, these things change many times, but anyway, and Ban Ki-moon, the world level chair. So these people are the top leaders of our organizations. They are a little bit like the president of countries where the prime minister is doing everything and is really in charge, or like the king of England, who basically is king by name. And it's shown, I mean, he has the crown, he has everything, and these people speak publicly and they represent. I mean, I don't want to diminish it. The fact that they accepted to be leaders of our clearly organizations clearly founded and by our founders, you see them sitting next to them and all that. This is amazing, and they do. But of course, the real engine behind the development lies with people who are really part of it and fully understand the meaning and believe in it and have no other business. Like these people have many. He was leading a country. Ban Ki-moon has his own foundation, and he is the chairman of a big bank in the United States. So the largest bank in the United States, things like that. They are busy, and so it's understandable. And so I slightly disagree with Dr. Beckler on that one, but of course, ideally, we should get there. Now, going back to the question, do we complement the Kane-type UN as being an able-type UN, or do we just simply replace it? Well, mostly we have been complementing them from our perspective. They think whatever they think, but this is what we see. But there's some elements of replacement. And well, the first element of replacement is the loss of trust in the UN, which many people outside share. I think a majority in the United States thinks, why bother with the UN? They have no power. They're just annoying. They often turn against the United States. The United States can take care of this by itself. Not only Donald Trump, but the population at large has this kind of sense many times. So that's the first way you can replace the United Nations in your mind, by just saying, but also concretely, replacing it means to have the goal to create an organization that can really compete with the United Nations and slowly replace it. As I said, it's not very realistic to achieve at this point, but some elements have been created. So envisioned as a complement to and eventually a future replacement of the United Nations, the globally operating UPF spearheads unificationist millenarianism, excuse my French, my English. That's for corny. This means that, this is biblical language, that there will be a millennium at the end of the world where a kingdom of peace for 1,000 years and so on. That's in Revelations. It means a vision for God's kingdom on earth, essentially, which of course people at UN and even with UPF don't all share, mostly don't share. Here you have the Vatican at the bottom. That's the place where it all happened in Christianity for a long time, and still much of it happens today, is God having his own country or not. The question is whether you believe that the Catholic Church represents God. Then, as you can see above, we have now increasingly in Korea, in Cheonpyeong, near Cheonpyeong Lake, an equivalent that in some ways is even more gorgeous and gigantic than the Vatican. in some ways only. Um, and of course, becomes like also in some ways and that's not everything what you see on the picture here, an equivalent to headquarters of the United Nations, though very different from that building. So that these are elements of replacement, and they are clearly focused on what makes us unique, not just some vague idea of replacing the United Nations, because that is also the spiritual center of our unification movement. Any of you who have been there, you know that. Nevertheless, it's a back and forth. We do have partners that are unbelievably close through the Universal Peace Federation. And so if you go to the page of UPF that says partners, there's a long list. I have just the first one here. You can scroll down. The first one is the African Union. So I don't need to explain what that means. That's the official continental level organization of countries in Africa. And they are official partners of our activities. Uh, that says a lot. So there has been incredible breakthroughs even very recently, especially 2018, 2019 with Dr. Hak Jahan's tour of Africa and other countries in the world, including Cambodia. So this is happening at the same time as a center has been created in Korea. Now, back to a slightly critical perspective, this time by our European friends, Pokorny and Zer, university professor, and Saganjan on his way to become a doctor. One of the first things in the article by Pokorny and Zer is, if only one key characteristic of the UPF, he says the UPF, would say UPF, had to be picked, it must be the seeking of mass attention. And so mass attention on the left, you see a speech Reverend Moon made on June 7, 1975 in Korea when there was a considerable tension and danger of invasion again by North Korea. So a rally for the salvation of the fatherland or for peace, for different, depending on the translation, different titles. But that rally, I was there representing Switzerland, one of the dots. That's massive. That's something that immediately appears on the headlines of the newspapers at that time. People reading papers today would be online. That is an attention-grabbing event. And I remember Reverend Moon said we have to have a bigger one than the government because every big organizations had such. Korea likes that. For the government, against the government. So the government had a similar one, and Christian churches had a similar one. And Reverend Moon said we have to have one that's bigger than both of them. And he was satisfied that we achieved it. It's big, 1 million more people. Of course, you can't count each single one. It's a lot of people. It was impressive. For 2 weeks, we worked there absolutely in an insane way. That again shows because we are so small, but so motivated, we can do things that only much bigger organizations and sometimes not even states, relatively small states, even the government cannot reach it. Even though we're very few, because we are so motivated. But the price, we were sleeping like 2, 3 hours a night at most. All day we were to prepare this. Absolutely unbelievable. And the sense, it was to be a rainy day in the morning. I remember we went with our buses picking up, I was very young, picking up people. And there was a little bit of drizzle or even a little bit of rain. And the clouds were ominous. And we were really like worried like crazy. Once people arrived there, blue skies and full sunshine all the way. So we took that as, an incredible sign from heaven. You can take it as that, or you can say, oh, just lucky. In any case, it happened. So that, and then if you see the laureates, I mean, I think this is Dr. Walsh, or maybe not. In any case, on one of the years when the Sonak Peace Prize, one of the latest peace prizes, was conferred upon some important people, I forgot which one who received it at that time. It's not small. You know, you have the pictures of all the VIPs on the wall, and of course moving, and the whole setup is gigantic and really lots of pomp, which, and I finish reading, mass attention to events filled with bombastic symbolism. So bombastic means, wow, it's there. Now, in the United States, we have a president now who likes exactly that. Everything he does is bombastic. It has to be bigger. There should be more gold. It should be taller. It should be better. It should be greater in every way possible. And then, of course, for me, which is something we are not trying to emulate, but sometimes we gave that impression because we always put our founders at the center, which gave some people the feeling that, you're doing great stuff, but that part I don't like so much. And here another sentence, Moon, spelled the German way, sketched his lofty vision of realizing world peace in characteristically monumental terms. Cannot deny that. But you can see here the critical tone, which means you do that, it's show off. And I don't believe that was the intent, and I believe that in both the United States, not just Donald Trump, but generally, and in Korea for sure, North Korea, but the South tries to imitate them, this kind of monumental, huge events are very much common and very much appreciated. People look up. They want this kind of thing to take you seriously. That's my belief. And definitely it's what gets a small movement that's totally unknown to become very, very, very famous almost instantly. And that was the point, to show we are here, we matter. Europeans are, for this, much more reserved. Swiss people are super reserved. The idea even of a strong president, unbearable to them. So indeed, I remember my uncle said always, oh, he hates that about us. He was so about us, but that I hate, this bombastic stuff, cult of personality, no, I don't like that. So that's a potential for, I think, misunderstanding, but it's there, you should be aware of it. Then we should not forget, however, that behind all this, there is a sincere, deep religious motivation and dimension. And that dimension is what gives life and meaning to even things that look perhaps sometimes to some a little bit different or maybe a little bit strange or overwhelming or whatever you call it. So the political dimension of UPF is most visible, the political dimension, but the religious dimension is very much present as well. However, since we are not able to create a religious UN within the United Nations, much of our religious work has been to really motivate religious people to work with us in different ways, like ACLC, the American Clergy Leadership Conference, that are not directly connected to the UN, and others, WCLC. But many religious activities take place with UPF because it's meant to bring the secular and the religious together, among other things. And you have some posters here. Now, more recently, of course, you know that much of this bombastic, as Pocconi says, or very showy, very impressive world level, after all, we are trying to be the new United Nations, much of that has been brutally challenged with the assassination of Prime Minister Abe in Japan, uh, and everything that followed in Japan and now in Korea, which shows to us our real strength is ourselves, our spirit that's been repeated a lot, and our capacity to put it into action, even if nobody else helps us, even if everything is taken away from us, based on that core understanding we have and who we are, we will continue. So it's great to have Ban Ki-moon with us. It's great to have Donald Trump sent a message for us and even defending us when talking to the president of Korea. It's great to have all these things. It's great to have the Pope receive the representatives of UPF, Dr. Thomas Walsh, that was the previous Pope, and the current head of UPF, Dr. Taj Ahmad, them being received not just among many others, but just privately for quite a long period of time, I think 40 minutes or 1 hour, I mean, much, much more than usual, by the Pope. It's great. It shows how far we have come, but it does not protect us from sudden collapse as long as the population at large and the leaders don't fully understand what we are doing, why we are doing, who we are, what is our motivation. We are always open to sudden misunderstandings, sudden changes in government, sudden mistakes by certain people, and everything suddenly seems to collapse. So uh, our strength, yeah, doesn't come from that. And it comes from the fact that our founders were willing to take on the UN to begin with. Crazy. And then, yeah, we developed a lot, but even if everything is taken away, we are still up to it. Now, religious liberty came up again very strongly because our religious liberty is indeed being attacked brutally by the Japanese and our Korean governments. We should just be careful to show that we really mean it for everybody, not just when we are being attacked. And that's something that sometimes we are so excited because we know our true parents are more important than any other religious group because second coming of Christ, only begotten daughter. If you believe that, understandably, you don't want Jews, you don't want Jehovah's Witnesses to be persecuted either. But that is a different level. And in that enthusiasm, sometimes we give the feeling of being self-serving. And so I think that's something that we should take seriously. I have this here because Kayleigh Moffitt, who is now the president of UPF, the United States, while Dr. Michael Jenkins on the left on this picture is president on the North American level. She was the first to complete the internship, the Peace Studies internship that led to her graduating last time. And she was my student also. She took these two courses. She is now the president of UPF, so it's all linked. One more point. The Chesner article, that's Amir Kareli et al., notes that if people accuse us sometimes of being self-serving and speaking about and doing things to show how good we are, but actually what we want is to be praised and to be accepted, so we don't really care about what we are doing. He says the Vatican executives, the Pope and cardinals and others, and Catholic priests who launched and lead Caritas Internationalis, we have seen that a few weeks ago, that's the organization in the Catholic Church worldwide that is the equivalent of the Red Cross on the Protestant or secular side. It's a relief organization. It's enormous. And the representative of Caritas Internationalis Nationalis in German at the United Nations in Geneva, which is where they are headquartered, was a close friend of my family. And he spoke at one of the assemblies that we discussed on the stage in his dressed as a bishop, which he was, and hugging true father. So that's one of these connections, by the way. On the way, there's so many connections are made, and people become old and they pass away. That's what happened with him. Um, anyway, when Caritas Internationalis, uh, when they created it and launched it, they were motivated by a Christian idea of responsibility toward the poor, absolutely, whom they consider as daughters and sons of God who have been redeemed by Jesus Christ, but are miserable. We may also speculate that those Catholic bishops and priests who work today for Caritas hope that their good deeds would benefit the image of the Catholic Church. In other words, we do it for them, but if then people look at us with better, with more friendly eyes, that's good too. Which has received its good share of negative publicity on other issues. In other words, if the Catholic Church, which many people criticize today, is praised on occasion because of the good work they do with Caritas, those who do it, the priests, the bishops, cardinals who do it, they probably don't mind having some good publicity, some good, being praised. But nobody tells them you do that just for that. Maybe people who hate the Catholic Church do. But in our case, we are automatically and immediately, if you just do religious work from our perspective, we are just a cult that wants to find new members. That's not what we are in any way. But if we do many things like what we do, it looks like we just do it to be able to do the other stuff successfully by getting people to like us, not because we really care. So that comparison to the Catholic Church shows that it doesn't have to be that, and it's very unfair, essentially, and that's the point being made here, to accuse only UPF of being a front organization when Caritas is not. Now, getting close to the end, I know it is a little bit long, but there's just so much to say without even going into the details. New alternatives. You may have noticed that, well, the United Nations has been very unpopular, as already emphasized, and many people have given up on it. And then when an organization that's unique suddenly loses steam and appears to be not going to make it, when that kind of phenomenon happens, what happens usually is that somebody else thinks, well, we have to replace them. And when that somebody else is the unification movement, it's quite a job. And that's why we have been having the difficulties we've had, and we still have, while still doing a lot. But it's much more likely that other groups of nations come together who perceive the UN to be not only not successful in creating a world level organization that will lead to peace, but who also believe that, well, the center of that United Nations is actually them, not us. So, in other words, accusing the United States and specifically of controlling the United Nations, even though the United States also believes that the UN has been used by the communists to counter the US. So basically, nobody's really happy with the UN. One of these new alternatives that have appeared recently is the so-called BRICS. B stands for, and you have the flags here and their logo, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And now there's a number of other countries that have joined as well. Here you have the last summit they had in South Africa, which explains that the central person holding everyone's hands is the South African president. You have Xi Jinping. You don't have Putin because he couldn't go. He would have been arrested because he is accused of war crimes or crimes against humanity or both by the International Court. So he was replaced by Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia. So they stand for multipolar world, and they would represent one major pole that wants to take more and more space, and of course it would be dreaming of replacing the United Nations, and that language is around. And then the most recent one that you probably didn't remember, but it's called the Board of Peace, which was launched as an idea in 2025 and in Davos, Switzerland again, sorry, at the 56th World Economic Forum in January this year. Donald Trump launched that idea to create a board of peace that was focused on creating peace in Gaza. But it has a much larger perspective than that. And clearly, it is meant to, if not supersede or replace the United Nations, challenging it. And as you know, there's this sense in America that America is really the country that can do the job of the UN, which, of course, is, if at all, only partly true. That Board of Peace is another second example that is, of course, completely different from representing totally different countries compared to BRICS. But even with that very big, also you could call it bombastic beginning, the countries that have accepted to join it so far are only very secondary countries in the world. I mean, none of the really important and meaningful countries, including the closest allies of the United States, has joined. And the future of that Board of Peace is open. I mention it just to say we are not the only ones. In other words, it's in the air. The UN has run its course, possibly. It's still there and still the only one that really matters, but we are entering that kind of a time. And then what do we do most recently, because all this is a few years back? Well, in the last few years, we have been battling for survival in Japan and Korea, where much of this was happening. Only remains the United States and, of course, all the other countries. But among the three so-called major providential nations, the US is now the one that can do something. And we have started something called Peace Starts With Me Alliance. That has mostly worked on the grassroots level, but also bringing together important people, of course, working with the government of the United States as much as possible, and with other important people. So we do that, but more in an efficient way, trying to achieve something, trying to achieve, first of all, to save what is already there in our movement, to get people who can to actually work to maintain what we have and to further develop it. So what we have here is a return to the roots, me. Peace starts with me. And this is something that also connects us with the United Nations, because they have, that was the 75th anniversary of the UN, peace begins with me. It's on the walls of the United Nations even today. So it means essentially the same thing. So even within the UN, the very secular UN, there's this awareness that if I want a peaceful world, I have to become peaceful myself. You don't have to be religious to understand that. And so that brings us back to what even the UN acknowledges. And it brings us back to what is being emphasized very strongly by our continental director, who is in charge of all these activities, in addition to UPF and to the Family Federation, Damien Dunkley. He emphasizes my sense of identity and my capacity to live this ideal that we all speak about, and to become a starting point for it and to share it with others. So basically, a new start from the inside and bringing others to join, but in a much more substantial way, and not necessarily with the huge, gigantic events that we have had, especially in Korea, and that were actually directly connected through the person who was central to them, to the problems we have today. So that is also Dr. Hakshahan's strong new guidance to stay away a little bit from these big things and to focus more on becoming ourselves who we should be. And that concludes my presentation of UPF. Thank you.